Take 10 with the Tennessee Tribune. I'm Sandra Long Weaver, Editorial Director for the Tennessee Tribune, and today we have a guest who has written a book about millennials. We talk a lot about millennials, but time to sort of do some research on them. So Ellis, who is a professor of communication at Lipscomb University, has just released her book in December 2016. Welcome.
Thank you.
And let's talk about the title of the book is The Original Millennial.
Yes.
And what does that mean, the original millennial?
Thank you for having me. The title Original Millennial, Lessons in Leadership for the Millennial Generation is focused on 6 defining areas that millennials must master in leadership in business and community. So there's a lot of conversation about who millennials are.
Right.
We're slackers, lazy, entitled, we're narcissists, etc. But there's not a conversation being directed toward who we are as leaders. By the year 2025, 75,
Which is not that far off.
right,
now.
in about 7 or 8 years or so, there will be a 75% of millennials essentially in the workplace in leadership positions, whether it be at the manager level or in a full-on C-suite leadership position, or even in business in general as entrepreneurs. So we're looking at a huge chunk of our population in the U.S. and even across the globe, millennials being in leadership.
Wow.
And so what does that mean for the future of businesses as well as the future of our communities? And so the conversation about who we are, that narrative was not included.
Okay, and let's start with who you are.
Sure, yeah.
Millennials. So millennials are born between 1980 and
1980 and 1995. So there's
Oh.
a 15-year span, if you will,
Okay.
that kind of breaks out every generations from millennials who go into, Gen Xers, baby boomers, all the way back to the silent generation.
Right.
So typically researchers and scientists will break out a 15, sometimes a 20-year lifespan, if you will, to categorize generations. Researchers Neil Howe and Strauss created the kind of a blueprint around looking at millennials and the foundation for who we are. I think their research came out in the 1990s, early 1990s, 91, 92.
Okay.
And their research was basically the foreground for what it looks like to predict who millennials would be.
Okay.
And essentially, the book is written around the group of millennials that turned, or the way millennials are defined or categorized as a generation, is the group that turned 18 or became an adult at the turn of the century.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that would be, they'd be around 20 years old in college, about to make that decision about what area they're going into.
Absolutely.
So what did you learn? How long did you research this? And where did the idea come from to look at millennials from a leadership point of view?
Sure. The idea came from a variety of different places, but I'll tell you first how long it took me. So it took me about a year. I actually launched this concept. There were several events that led up to the idea to write this book. But the defining event was an invitation to deliver the keynote address at the Urban League Young Professionals Conference in Memphis, the Memphis Urban League, and I'm a native of Memphis.
Ah.
And they invited me to be the keynote speaker at their annual conference. And in talking to the then president, Cynthia Daniels, and what she needed and what she wanted from me as a keynote speaker, and accept the invitation, I said, Cynthia, what is the audience? And she said, it's going to be about 250 millennials. And I said, whoa, okay, that's interesting.
Okay.
And I kept connecting what potentially could be my story, or what could be the thing that I wanted to leave them with in an 18, 20-minute keynote. The theme of the conference was cultural change and social entrepreneurship. And that's something for me that I've been involved in pretty much all my life.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. So I start off the book telling that very same story that I told at that conference, and ended up launching the book at the conference. So it took me from August 2015 to about August 2016 to actually write the book, and actually then publish the book, self-publish the book around August or so. But
so what is the story?
the story is that when I was 14 years old, I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And even then, I had some entrepreneurial things that I was playing around with at maybe age 10 or 11. And I realized that I had some talents and some gifts and some interest in being a business owner at a very young age. And around 14, I learned how to give manicures and pedicures. Salon quality, yes, salon quality.
Okay.
And I had a full-on operation running out of the living room.
Oh, what
And
did your parents think?
my mother was 100% supportive.
Okay.
And she would take me each week to the beauty supply store to stock up on supplies. And we live in a predominantly black neighborhood in Memphis. And so just about all of the 2 to 3 stores that I like to shop at to get my supplies were owned by Koreans.
Interesting.
And at age 14, I couldn't quite understand that. Of course, raised to understand multiculturalism and understand that no matter what your race, age, or gender is, you should be able to own a business and run a business in any part of a community you chose. But I could not quite understand why someone who didn't look like me, who didn't use the products that I use, who didn't quite understand my hair texture or my skin tone, would be selling products in my community to people like me. And I asked that question at 14 and continued to ask it throughout the rest of my life. Why? That's one of the distinctions of the millennial generation. We like to ask why.
Oh,
right?
Really? Okay, yes.
and other generations, baby boomers, Gen Xers, why was not necessarily a question that they could get an answer to from their parents. The question of why was introduced more so with the millennial generation. But what makes the distinction about an original millennial is an original millennial takes it a next step further. Not only do we ask why, but we ask why not.
Oh, why not?
And that why not philosophy is a part of our originality in being leaders in business and community. If we see something that we don't like in our communities, we go try to fix it. If we see something that needs to be improved in business, we figure out how to come up with a solution for it. And that's what makes that distinction from a millennial, right? Someone who just belongs in the generation by date of birth.
I see.
Versus someone who actually carries that originality into the work that they do.
And into a leadership role.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And so as you did your research, and I think I read you interviewed over 50 millennials.
Yes.
To put this together. What did you find anything that distinguishes African American millennials from other ethnic groups?
Sure. I interviewed, as you said, over 50 millennials, and by trade, I'm a communicator, professional communicator, and so I advise companies on how to map out their social media strategy, their strategic communication, etc., their diversity and inclusion, and also work with individuals as well who are in leadership roles. And so the call out to try to find these amazing millennials was not difficult at all.
Oh, really?
I had probably about almost 1,000 responses.
Really?
Of just amazing millennials from across the country and even across the globe. So I had to go through the process of trying to handpick who I wanted to actually include in the book. So ultimately going through that process for several months and trying to figure out who I needed to include, ultimately narrowed it down to about 50 interviews. And then from that 50, about 20 or so made the actual cut. And then throughout the editing process, 12 ended up being featured in the book.
Oh, wow.
And one of the distinctions, and I reference research from Nielsen in the book. Actually, a colleague at Nielsen gave me a great endorsement on the book as well. But she commissioned a study in Nielsen about African American millennials. And in fact, what they found is that we're highly educated, we are highly entrepreneurial, we have become somewhat wise in how we spend our money, we're frugal. Yes. We love social interaction. And we love community engagement and involvement, and we use social media to leverage our community engagement and involvement as well. That's a huge distinction. Even if we align that to the spending power, the buying power of the African American community, millennials are a huge part of that. Particularly, for things that we know are going to benefit our community. So that research is featured from Nielsen. And to be quite frank, of the 50 millennials that I interviewed, not by, just because I'm African American, but the ones who were significantly just impressive just happened to be African Americans.
Really?
So in order to have balance from ethnicities, I had to not interview some folks and not include them.
Okay.
So my hope is that ultimately we'll get a chance to feature them in the podcast and in some other ways, because their stories were just amazing.
Okay, I was going to say, so will we see them in the next book, or?
I don't know about a next book, but there will be a podcast where we've recorded some of the interviews. Some of the interviews are featured already on YouTube. Anyone who goes to YouTube and searches the original Millennial will find a playlist of all the videos, interviews that we've done on video.
Oh, great.
But then also there's some audio content that we didn't get to feature in the book and on YouTube that will be in the on the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the original Millennial. We've been talking with Ariel Ellis of Lipscomb University. And so tell us how we can get the book.
The book is at theoriginalmillennial.com, at the website www.theoriginalmillennial.com. It's also on Amazon if you were to search it on Amazon.com as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
This was very interesting. The original, I've learned a little bit more about millennials, and my children are millennials, so maybe I can use some of this information to leverage what I want.
Absolutely. That's a great, the book is really based on some very strong, significant lessons for leadership for any generation.
Okay.
However, the theme is focused on millennials.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you the next time.